This week in CIST 1530, we're going to look at Chapter 13, Preparing Files for the Web. In this chapter, we're going to look at using the frame tool to create a placeholder for a layout, create and stylize a button for a website, use layer groups and artboards, optimize design assets for web, record an action to automate a series of steps, play an action to affect multiple images, save entire layouts and individual assets using the export as dialog, and also design for multiple screen sizes with multiple artboards. So we're looking at the screen, we see our starting document, and we'll see our completed document once we are finished with. So first thing we'll do is we'll make sure we have Photoshop started, and you're going to load the 13 start.psd file. You'll also see that in your documents, you will have a lot of other files that you'll be using throughout this chapter. All right, so we'll start by creating placeholders with the frame tool. Okay, the frame tools, this is located in the tools panel. It's used to create placeholders for web page graphics. A couple points to understand about frames is that frames are vector objects. They're essentially the same as the shapes that we created with the shape and pen tool in chapter 8. The frames aren't just for web design. They're also used for any situation where you want to set aside a space for a graphic to be inserted later. So in a way, you can use frames for mock-ups and templates this way. The Properties panel will display information about and options for selected frames and its contents. So let's first look at adding a frame. First, we're going to make sure that our rulers are on. So we're going to go to Edit, come down to Preferences, and then Unit and Rulers. Okay, in the Unit and Rulers, we want to make sure that we have pixels selected. And then we're going to click OK. Now to view the info, we're going to Windows and choose Info, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of F8. Okay, so the info panel is going to display information as we move the pointer. For example, as we see, as I move the pointer, you can see the X and Y axis will change here to give me information. You also see the RGB or the CMYK will change as well to give me the color information as I move my mouse pointer. Now, if your rulers aren't visible, you want to make sure you come to View and then choose Rulers here to turn those on and off. All right, so to add a frame, we're going to go to the Frame tool. As we'll see the placeholder or the animation of adding a frame. So we're going to make sure we have the Frame tool selected. And first thing we're going to do, we'll create a frame over this large gray area. Okay, so now I can adjust this if it's not exactly where I want it by moving the sizing handles. Okay, so with this X that's inside this placeholder, it's ready to contain a graphic. So now we're going to look at adding a graphic to this image. So we're going to make sure that frame 1 is selected in the Layers panel. We'll come up to File, and we'll come to Paste Link, which is going to open up my dialog box. We're going to look for the northshore.jpg. So first I got to get to the correct chapter. This will be located in the art folder. And choose North Shore. And now it's been placed in my frame holder that I drew. You can also drag an image from Bridge over and drop it into the frame as well. You can see I can drag this around to replace this in the frame. So we'll go back through this. We got to do this again. So looking at this in Bridge of how to add an image through Bridge. As soon as Bridge will open, I'll drag this over to embed the image into the placeholder. Okay, so I have Bridge open. We'll navigate to the correct folder. Bridge runs really slow on my machine. Choose Art. So I'm going to click the image and then drag it into the placeholder. You see that this has been added now into the image. So now we'll go back to my frame tool. So I'm going to change the frame after I collect it, after I created it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a frame. I'll look at it down here. All right. Now, when I do this, the exact size is not going to be important because I'm going to edit this frame. So in the Properties panel, for the frame, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change the height to 180 pixels, the width to 180 pixels. I'm going to change the X axis to 40 pixels and the Y axis to 648 pixels. So when you're finished, it should be matched up along this first gray square. So you can use the values to actually position your frames more accurately. You can also, remember, get those location information from the XY axis here, so that you can get the information of where you want the item placed. Okay, so I can also now use this to duplicate the frame. Since I've already got the size set for the frame and the other three are going to be the same size, I can simply duplicate these. Now it's going to be similar to duplicating a layer because it's going to create them in the layers panel. I can do this by clicking the frame one. I can drag it to the create a new layer button. You see I've now frame one copy. And from in here, I can change the properties for this. So I'm going to change, for example, this, the X value, excuse me, from 1 to 300. See, it moves to the second frame. So I can repeat these for each frame. The third frame, I'm going to put it at 550. And the last frame, I'm going to set it 800 pixels on the X axis. Now, to add images to these, I want to make sure that I have the correct frame selected. And in the properties panel, in here, I'm going to go to the insert image. And I'm going to place from local disk, and I'm going to choose linked. Okay, so this allows me, I'm going back to my File Explorer to find the file. In this case, I'm going to find the beach. We'll click place. The beach has been placed in the image. Then I'll just repeat this step and place the other images. The second one will be the North Shore. Third image will be the young. And finally, the last image will be the main one. So creating frames, putting the images into the frame holders is a fairly easy process. All right, so now with this, I'm going into transforms. You see, this one doesn't fit correctly. So I want to make sure that I have the correct layer selected. So I'm going to make sure I have the image itself selected. I'm going to come to Edit and Free Transform. And from here, I'm going to drag the handles till I can get the entire image filled. I'll click Commit. In that case, I now have resized the image, transformed the scale of the image so that it will fit into the frame. Next, I'm going to use layer groups to create button graphics. So I want to make sure that I have the info button open. So I want to put my pointer on the horizontal ruler and I drag a ruler guide down until the Y value on the info panel is at 795 pixels. So I'd simply click on the ruler and start dragging. You see the Y is updating. I'm currently at 847, so I want to go back to 795. So now I've placed a guide on this. So I'm going to create buttons for this image. Now I'm going to go back in and clear all these guides so that we can remove everyone that was just visible. We'll drag this back down to 795. So now I only have the one guide to see. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. So we have this man on the beach. And I'm going to select the beach frame in the layers panel. I'm going to click a new layer button. So once created, it's called layer 2. I'm going to rename this band. For here, I'm going to choose the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to drag a selection across the bottom of the image. It should be 180 pixels wide by 33 pixels high. You can see the height and width in our info panel. So right now I'm at 180 and 32. And so now I'm going to release, and I've drawn my marquee. Notice I am a little off here, so I want to make sure that I drag this so it matches up. You'll see the purple lines that are appearing. Let me know that it is now even with my image. I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to come to Fill. Okay, in my Fill dialog box, I'm going to choose Color. And I'm going to choose a dark blue. Now, the RGBs that I'm going to set is the RGBs will be 25. The green is going to be 72. And then finally, my blue will be 121. We'll click OK. Click OK again. And so now I've used this to fill my dialog box. So once I'm through with this, I want to deselect. So I go to Select, Deselect. I'm going to choose my horizontal top tool. I will have it to Myriad Pro. Font style set to regular. My font size is going to be 18 points. Strong, center aligned, and the color is white. So I'm going to click in the middle of this and type in Gallery 1. Could use the Move tool to reposition the text as needed. Now to create a group of these, I want to make sure I have the text and the band selected. So I'm going to hold down Control and select both of those. From here, I'm going to Layer and Group Layers. So this creates a group of Group 1. I'm going to double click this and I'm going to rename this Gallery 1. You see in this group, in this folder, I do have those two layers. Okay, so if I move Group 1, for example, if I move it below a layer, everything's moved together. Now, to duplicate the buttons, so I'm going to duplicate the bands, the band and the text. I want to make sure that I have the Gallery 1 folder selected, the Move tool selected, I want to make sure that Auto Select is not selected. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to drag this to the right. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to move this Galleries 1 and Gallery 1 new copy above the other layers. So as I drag this, hold down the Alt key. This allows me to drag and make a copy of these groups. So obviously I don't want this to say Gallery 1 across all of these. So I'm going to rename this to Gallery 2. And Gallery 3, Gallery 4 as far as my groups. And in each group, I'm going to use the horizontal top tool to change the text that will appear on the screen. Now I have the text has been updated for both my layers, my groups, and the text that's on the screen. Once I'm through this, I'm going to close all of these layers out. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out here so we can see these images. I'm going to zoom in not quite as close, just so we can get a little bit more view, but still have a little bit of clarity on this. Okay, so now we're going to look at adding in layer styles for the images. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to add a drop shadow and a stroke. So we're going to go to the Gallery 1, and we're going to click either the Add a Layer Style button, the FX button. We're going to choose Drop Shadow. To bring up our Drop Shadow or Layer Styles dialog box, we're going to set the opacity to 27%. The distance will be set to 9 pixels. The spread to 19%. Finally, the size to 18 pixels. Now, with this box still open, we'll go ahead and add the stroke. So we want to make sure that we click the button for the stroke and click on the stroke to get to the settings. And here we're going to set the size at 1 pixel. The position we're going to put as to inside. And we're going to change the color. So we'll click the color button. And we want it to be the same color as the band. So we're just going to click in the band to get the same color settings. We'll click OK. We'll click OK again. for the settings that we've applied to this image. Notice we do have the FX that's in our layer panel. If we hold down the Alt key, we can drag this, and so we're making the copies of our layer styles and applying it to the next images. So we've now applied that to all of our buttons that we have created. So next we're going to work with the button art layer group. We're going to turn on the navigation. So we'll go to our layers panel and click the eye icon and make sure that we can see the navigation link. So once we've done this, we can go up to File, we can save the file, and we can close it. So we can see now that at this point, we make sure we save the file so that I don't mess up my starting document. I am going to save this with a different name. So I'll do a save as, and I'm just going to name it working. Next step we're going to look at is working with multi-steps. We're going to take an action, create an action, and we're going to apply this to multiple images. So first I'm going to go to File and Open. I'm going to come to my Buttons folder, and I'm going to look for Gallery 5. Now, actions or steps, you can record actions or you can use some preset actions. They're going to be located under your windows when you come to actions. Okay, so we'll see some different actions that can be applied that you can run. For example, if I want to add a I'm just going to make a quick selection here. If I wanted to add a vignette, I can click on this and click play. And it goes through the steps of creating these actions for me. So I'm going to undo that steps. Do you see the steps that it made? At this point, it made a snapshot. It created the feather effect with the settings that were applied, made a layer. Show current layer, make layer, fill. So all those steps were automated. So if I want to record an action, for this one, I'm going to click the new action button. So I'm going to create a new action, and I'm going to name this resizing and styling images. And then I'm going to click record. Now what this is doing now is the actions I take are being recorded into this step. So first I'm going to choose image size. I want to make sure that resample is selected here. Right, for the width, I'm going to change the width to 180. Height, to 180. Make sure these are in pixels. I'm going to click OK. So resize the image. Then I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen. And from here, I'm going to apply the Smart Sharpen. I want to make sure the amount is 100%. The radius is 1.0 pixels. And then I'm going to click OK. And so I've now added another step in my action. So one thing I need to do is make sure that I've changed this background layer. So I got some other steps I want to do that I can't. So I'm going to make this a layer from the background. I'm going to rename this button. Click OK. Once again, you see that these are being recorded as I go through the steps. Okay, so now I'm going back to Image. I'm going to choose the canvas size. Make sure that I'm in pixels. I'm going to choose the width and the height to set to 220 pixels. I'm going to click the center square to make sure everything is anchored, extended evenly on all sides. I'll click OK. Now in the layer style dialog box I'm going to open, I'm going to add, I'm clicking drop shadow. Change the opacity 27%, the angle to 120%, the distance to 9, spread to 19, and the size to 18. From here I'm going to stroke. Size is going to be 1 pixel. Positions will be inside. The color should already be matching. So I'm going to click OK to apply the layer style. Now I need to save this. I'm going to go to File, Save As. Make sure that my Save As type is at Photoshop. I'm going to leave the name at it's Gallery 5. I'm going to click Save. And I have the Photoshop format options. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to close this file. And then I'm going to click the Stop button to stop the recording. And I'm going to close this one now. Okay, so now I'm back to my beginning file, beginning screen for Photoshop. Now, I can play this file. So I don't have to go through those steps for every gallery file I'm adding. So I can batch play this. So I'm going to choose File, Open. I'm going to navigate to the Lesson 13 Buttons folder. Holding down the Control key, I'm going to choose Gallery 6, 7, and 8. And I'm going to click Open. So this will open up all of the files. And from here, I'm going to go to File, Automate. And from this option, I'm going to choose Batch. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is here is the play as I set the actions here. So I'm at the resizing and styling images action. So I'll make sure that is on the correct image or the correct action to play. The source, I'm going to choose open files. Now you can apply this to a certain folder as well, but in this case I've already opened the files. I'll make sure that none is chosen in the destination. So you can also actually change, for example, you can choose to save and close those. You can choose to save them in a different folder, the actions as well. I'm going to leave these as none. So I'm going to click OK. And the actions that I have performed are recorded and have now been performed on those images. So I'm going to open up the working folder file again. So now we're going to move these buttons over. So in the layer 4, we're going to make sure that we have the gallery 4 selected in the layers. So I'm going to choose File, Place Embedded. We'll click the Gallery 5 Photoshop file. Then I'm going to drag this so it's below Gallery 1 button. And then commit to the new location for the image. Now I'm just going to do this for the other files as well. So I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and choose the other images. Once again, I want to drag them to the new location. You can use these purple lines that are appearing as a guide to show you when you're even with the images above it. Like, for example, the one Gallery 4, Gallery 8 is now even with the middle of this. And it's also even with the Gallery 5 through 7 at the top and the bottom of those buttons. All right, so now I've placed all of my images that I've created, rented actions, they're all into this area. Now we're going to look at designing with artboards. Okay, so artboards, first thing we're going to do, first we're going to save this. Let us save and close this. So we'll move into working with the artboards. So we're going to go to File, Open, back to our Chapter 13 folder. And we're going to start with the 13 muso.psd. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as working. So that I don't overwrite my starting files. Now from here, I'm going to select everything in here. So I'm going to select all layers. So you see that I have all layers have been selected over in my layers panel, with the exception of my background layer. Now from the layer menu, I'm going to go to layer, I'm going to new, and then I'm choosing artboard from layers. So this allows me to create a new artboard. I'm going to name it desktop and click OK. And you see that when I expand the desktop, everything has been placed in that one artboard. Now, underneath the Move tool, you'll see that you do have the artboard tool. So I'm going to select it, and we're now working in our artboard. So over in my Layers panel, I'm going to double click the name of the desktop copy, a duplicate artboard, and I'm going to name it iPhone. Excuse me, I've got to duplicate it first. I missed a step. So I'm going to click Alt on my keyboard, and I'm going to excuse me one second, let me zoom back out. So holding the Alt key, I'm going to click the Add Artboard button. That's to the right of the artboard. Close these out of the way here. Seems to not be working on mine. There we go. All right. So with this selected, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click the Add New Art button. So I've made a new copy here. I'm going to rename this iPhone. In my Properties panel, for this, I'm going to set the artboard to Presets menu. I'm going to set this to iPhone 876. So I'm resizing my artboard for the iPhone 8, 7, or 6. You can see that it will have the pixels set at 750 pixels wide and 1334 pixels for the height. So this allows me to design for the iPhone size. Okay, so from here I'm going to save this. All right, so now we got different artboards. We got one for the desktop, one that's for our smartphone. So in here, I'm going to, in the Layers panel, I'm going to expand the iPhone artboard. And I'm going to shift click the button art, and the last layer, which will be layer 0. So I'm going to select everything but the artboard itself's name. Going to free transform this, edit, free transform. Now, some options I'm going to do in the change I'm going to do in the option bar is I am going to toggle the reference point checkbox to select it. And then from this area, I want to make sure the reference points is visible as I reposition. So I'm going to choose the top left square. So now that everything's going to be performed from that top left corner of the bounding box instead of the center. I want to make sure that the maintain aspect ratio is locked. And for the width of this, I am going to change this to 726 pixels. One of the options here first is that I'm set on percentages. And so I'm going to click the check mark button to apply. I know I need to reposition this. I'm going to use a shift and I'm going to drag these so I can reposition these so I can see the entire screen. Once I've got this placed, the correct image, I would commit the transfer. I've already done that. So if we go back to do this, undo the free transform. We'll go back through the process again. So I'm going to make my selections, edit, free transform. The settings for this, once again, we'll set to the upper left. So we'll be set to 726 pixels. Hit enter to accept this. Now I'm going to drag this, hold it down, shift. So I'm going to drag the box until I can see everything in it. And then commit. So now I'm coming over to the logo and only selecting it. From here, I'm going to go to edit free transform. So I'm going to resize just this area here. So we'll move this to 672 pixels wide. And I'm going to commit the change to the logo. Now I'm coming back over to the area. I'm going to choose the banner art, the left column and right column. Make sure I have all of these layers selected. So I'm going to come up to the move tool and I'm going to shift drag the layers until the top is even with the top of the blue button stack on the left. Okay, so I'm going to hit the shift key. I'm going to drag these down until they're going to be even with this area here. Should put me relatively right there. So now I'm going to go to the right column, and I want to use just the right column group. And here I'm going to go back to Edit Free Transform. So now I'm working with just this group here. See, 1 second, I'll skip a step. So from here, I'm going to select the iPhone artboard. So I'm going to choose everything that's selected in here. All right, so in here I'm going to use, I'm going to change the size of this. Make sure the artboard tool is selected. And now I'm going to drag the bottom handle of this down until I'm at 2800 pixels tall. Okay, so I'm increasing the size of this artboard. Now with the right column selected, I'm going to go back to Edit Free Transform. And in here, I want to make sure that my reference point is selected. I want to choose the top right square. Make sure the maintain aspect ratio is locked. And I'm going to enter 672 pixels for the width. And click enter to apply the new length. And now I'm going to move this so I'm going to shift drag this until that down a vertical move of 1200. And my computer kind of locked up on me for a second. Let me go back to the actual settings on that. Okay, so I'm shift dragging this. So the Y value up here should say about 1680 when I drag this down. It's close enough. So I've dragged this down. It's now at 1681. And then I'm going to commit the changes. I'm going to do the same thing for the left column. Choose the left column, choose File, Free Transform, or Edit Free Transform. Here I'm going to make sure that the top left reference point is selected. Change the width of this to 672. And exit the transformation. And so now I've designed a web page that I created for desktop and I converted it now to work with an iPhone. So to see these, how they will look on the two devices. All right, so now we're going to look at exporting artboards. This is simple. We just go to File, and we come to Export, and here we're going to choose Export As. So this is going to bring up our Export As dialog box. Okay, so now you see we've got the iPhone desktop layers have been there, layer groups. We can see the image size for each of these, format that we're going to export to. So I'll make sure I got the iPhone selected. On the size, I'm going to leave it as 1. The suffix, I'm going to leave it as empty. Over in the file settings, I'm going to use JPEG, and I'm going to use 80% for the quality. You can use the slider, or you can type in the value as well. In the color space, I'm going to convert this to sRGB. In other settings, I'm going to leave as long, and then I'm going to click on the desktop, and I'll apply the same setting. So 80% here. Have this selected. So now we'll make sure that the select all is selected, so that everything is going to be sent out. It's going to be export. I'm going to click export. It's going to let me navigate to my files. So in this case, in the assets folder, choose select folder. And when we look in the assets folder, we'll see that we do have these JPEGs have been exported from Photoshop to the folder we chose. Now you can also export the layers as assets. For this, for this case, you don't want to go to File, Export As. That's not a setting you're going to choose on this one. One quick thing though, if you do want to export an image, whether it's a Photoshop file or a artboard, you can export as PNG this way. But to export the layers as assets, we're going to go to Layer, and we're going to export as from Layer. Okay, from in here, we'll see the columns that we have selected. So in this case, I'm going to select the desktop artboard. So we'll go to Layer, Export As, and you see that we'll have all of the images that will be located here once I select the layers. So we see we have all the layers listed separately. So in here we can come in and we can choose the settings for each individual layer, and we can export those out as needed. Okay, so this will bring us to the end of chapter 13.